Right, it is going.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning.
Good morning.
See that everyone's cameras are starting to work. Everyone's powering up. I'll just see if we'll wait to see another couple of screens come on before we kind of kick off.
I see their names and it's popping. It's slowly loading.
Here we go. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really thrilled to be able to put on this masterclass with the very great Aaron Ginsburg, all the way from Colorado in America today. Just a couple of things before I hand over to Aaron. I just wanted to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we are all meeting today on various lands, because we are obviously coming from all of our homes, offices, lounge rooms, living rooms, and just pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Obviously, I think most people by this point are probably pretty good with Zoom, because I think we've all probably used it a bit over the last couple of months. But just for housekeeping reasons, obviously, if you're not speaking, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself just so that we don't get any kind of barking dogs or crying children in the background, that'd be fantastic. We are also recording the session today, so just to be aware that it is recorded. And I won't do too much of an introduction to Aaron, because I know that he will be able to tell you a lot about his amazing journey as a writer, as an executive producer, what he's doing with his current show on New Amsterdam. But we're really grateful, Aaron. Thank you so much for making time available. I know it's your Sunday there, and I know that you're currently in a writer's room as we speak. So taking this time out of your schedule is incredibly beneficial for everybody in this room. I'm really excited that all of you can meet today, because I understand that you may not have known each other before all becoming part of the same cohort of the Greg Cooters, as we're calling you, for 2020. We were so impressed with all of your work. We have an amazing group here, and we're really excited to see hopefully one of you placed in this international writers room at some point. Obviously, it's taking longer than we would have liked, but circumstances being what they are, we are just kind of waiting a little bit and seeing what happens on that international front. And I think Aaron will probably tell us a little bit about that from his point of view, knowing how I think, if I'm right, his writers room is currently being done remotely. So thank you for your patience. We are definitely going to be working hard to try and find a placement for one of you, hopefully soon. But in the meantime, really great to offer this opportunity for you to kind of hear from somebody on that international level, and hopefully prep you a little bit more so that when the time comes for one of you, you'll be feeling confident and ready to go. So that'll be it from me. You will occasionally see a Screen Queensland name probably pop up, like I can see Dear Ears name on the screen. The content team might be trying to just sort of pop in and out through the sessions today, but please don't mind us. We won't be interrupting, and that is it really. So over to you, Aaron. Good luck, and have a great session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, and if any other people on the Screen Queensland pop in and I don't see them, someone just say something, because I have a couple different things running with this masterclass today, and there's a good chance I won't see a new participant appear in the waiting room. So if that happens, just someone be like, hey, someone's waiting to get in. Well, hello everyone. It's so nice to meet you guys. I will say that as we get going into this, there's going to be lots of places along the way where I will want you to talk. I'll ask you questions, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts. So it's not just me rambling on for the whole time. I want to try to, just as an overall scope, kind of give you a sense of who I am. I want to get to know who you guys are, and then talk in sort of broad category of how I got in and how to break in to the business over on the Hollywood side. Obviously, a lot of you guys are working and doing incredible stuff in Australia right now. I read all your bios, and I'm intimidated. So thank you for allowing me to be here. and then we'll get into like the main section. We're going to take New Amsterdam as an example, and we're going to do some real story structure, deep diving, kind of break down how we do it in our writer's room, and sort of hopefully by the end you'll feel like you'll have a better sense of how a U.S. network show breaks down an episode of television. And then we'll get into like etiquette in the writer's room and anything else you could possibly want to know. So with that preface, let me just give you a little bit about myself. So I am currently an executive producer on New Amsterdam, but my journey to get here was long and strange, as is everyone's in Hollywood and in Los Angeles and anywhere really. I, at a young age, knew without any doubt that I should be an actor. Obviously, that didn't work out because I'm not very good at it. But that isn't because basically when I went to undergrad with a bunch of other people who wanted to be actors, and while I was acting alongside of them, I realized, holy God, these people are really good. And maybe this isn't where I want to be, but I want to be in the arts in some way. I didn't know what I should do. And so I moved over to directing. I started directing in undergrad. And from there, I ended up working as a managing director and a director at a theater company in America that was relatively well known and beloved, and did that for many years. And it was only when I had found myself in New York City to try to become a playwright that the idea of working in film and television popped into my brain. Like for some reason, it never occurred to me. And then I saw how much playwrights got paid to live in New York, and was like, well, that isn't going to work, is it? So I wrote a screenplay, which I ended up selling, my first screenplay. And I was in New York, living in a one-room studio with a couple, which was not a good situation. I slept in the kitchen, and I sold this screenplay, and I thought, this is it. And I packed up my 2 suitcases of stuff, and I went to Los Angeles. And by the time I arrived, that company who had bought my screenplay was out of business. But I was here in Los Angeles, and thus the journey began once again. From there, I literally tried everything I could to break in. I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I studied, and I tried to network. I did everything you could do. I pretended to be an entertainment attorney for a while. I do not have any legal background, you guys should know. But I was determined, and eventually, through a series of the stars aligning, I ended up exactly where I needed to be, which was to write hidden camera pranks for a reality show, which, as you guys can imagine, is not super fulfilling if you want to be an artist. If you want to write stories that profoundly move and change people, this was, how can we trick people in a public setting and then humiliate them within an inch of their life? And it paid. It paid more than I'd ever been paid before, and I started doing it more and more. And within very little amount of time, I became a producer of reality shows. Are you guys familiar with Unreal? You know that show Unreal? It's like a behind the scenes of The Bachelor. Well, for many years in my life, I was the Sherry Appleby character, the sort of somewhat vaguely evil person who manipulates people to get the soundbite they want while they're trying to hook people up on TV. It's terrible. I could not get out of it because I was good at it, and it was paying my rent. But eventually, I got this side job, like a side hustle. I'm sure you guys are familiar with side hustles. And I basically got hired to write like interviews for a magazine. Like this magazine, it's no longer in business, called Scripts magazine. And I would interview like Aaron Sorkin and ask him about writing his movies. And it was fun, but like Aaron Sorkin, as much as I like his writing, won't help me personally. But a TV writer might, if I could impress a TV writer. So I asked the editors of this magazine, hey, could I interview some showrunners? And they were like, oh, we don't really do that for this magazine. It's only screenwriters. And I was like, well, why? I mean, like, TV is the writer's medium, whereas films are more of a director's medium. At least that's what it's considered. I would argue that, but that is definitely the philosophy. And so they said, yeah, so feel free to, to interview if you can get the interviews, we'll do it. So I reached out to every contact I could find. And I was put in place with a man named Matt Nix, who created a television show called Burn Notice. And I sat down with him and I said, here's what I want to do. I don't know if you guys know Burn Notice. It was on a number of years ago. It's essentially a spy show in Miami. And I said, rather than just interview you, I want to interview you while we break into a CIA outpost. And Matt Nix was like, what? Now I'm intrigued. And I was like, it's just going to be like an unusual interview. We're just going to while I'm interviewing you about how you write TV, I'm just going to stand by your side while we sneak into a CIA outpost and we blow it up. And he was like, well, all right, I'm in. So I hired a photographer and we staged a huge break-in to an old abandoned building while I was interviewing him about how he wrote Bird Notice. And the article, which is only 2,000 words, essentially is a roadmap of how to write an episode of Bird Notice, hidden within an interview. Like in the end of Act 4 of the interview, Matt Nix, the creator of Bird Notice, turns a gun on me and betrays me. Like everything that happens in an episode of Bird Notice happened in this article in a sort of meta way. And I turned it in and, it got a good response, but Matt Nix was like, I need to hire you on my show immediately. Unfortunately, his show was staffed, couldn't get on it, but he said, let's develop another show, just you and I. And I was like, I'm in, I'm finally in. It's taken me, 8 years of reality show producing, and I'm finally in the scripted world. I developed a whole show with Matt Nix. It took us about 4 months. And then a week before we were going to take it out to sell it, Matt Nix called me to say he accidentally sold another television show. And we couldn't take out, his deal was up. He couldn't take out the show I'd come up with him. And it went into a drawer, a virtual drawer, where it has remained. That was many years ago. I've never even looked at it. It's probably terrible. But he had accidentally sold a show called The Good Guys, and he hired me as a staff writer. And I was like, oh my God, my first staff job. I'm finally in a writer's room. I'm finally where I want to be. I hope I know what to do. And by the end of the first series of that, which was 20 episodes, I had written 4 and produced 6 of the first season as the lowest level in the entire room. And the reason is that every weird, dumb job that I had had up to that moment in time had prepared me to do this. The only difference between doing a network television show or a cable television show and reality TV is that the actors are better in network and cable. But it's all still producing a giant play, which is what my background was. So that's how I ended up here. And now I'd like to go through and just hear about you guys. I assumed you guys all already knew each other, but it sounds like that isn't the case. So this will be really fun. Let's just go through. Might be easier if I just pick someone. Is that too nervous if I just point at somebody and have them do a little intro? I'd love to hear where you are and what you hope to get out of this. And I'm going to start with you, Laura.
Unmute. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. It's great to be here. Also honored. Thank you for your time, Aaron. It's awesome that we get to hear from you. Yeah, I guess for me, I've had just random sort of sort of amateur sort of level of like creating and writing and that sort of thing, where up until probably last year, everything I'd done creatively was sort of just with local filmmakers, with friends, and competitions and things like that. And then last year, something I wrote, we pitched to production companies and such, and Easy Tiger Productions from New South Wales came on board to attach themselves to this project I've written. And then we're at the process now of just trying to develop it and a bit further and then pitch to networks and such, which has been really exciting. And that's where Screen Queensland has come along and really supported this journey. And yeah, that was a project previously titled Holly Wouldn't, which is getting thrown out when we're trying to think of a new title, something less clunky. And yeah, and we've actually changed directions, and it was previously about just an actress coming back from Hollywood and back to Brisbane and trying to figure herself out. And now it is more about a family-centered comedy about an actress returning from an unsuccessful stint in Los Angeles, and she now comes back and fulfills her family's wishes, specifically her father's, and that is to quit the industry. Yeah. And it explores just trying to find one's purpose against the backdrop of conservative family life, and it's just chaotic. And yeah, it's been developed for a short form series.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
her heart is the most difficult role she ever has to play is being a member of her own family. So would you say it is
That's great.
You can have that for free. Would you say that it's more comedy than drama, or is it right in the middle?
Oh, definitely comedy. Yeah.
Comedy. So we'll be doing when we get a little deeper into this, we'll be doing some looking at hour-long story structure. But just so you know, it absolutely all the rules apply to half hour. It's just there's less scenes really. But as we get into it, I just so you know, I will be focusing more on hour long. But there's tons that you'll take from this. Well, congratulations. That is awesome.
Thank you.
I like Hollywood for the record.
Okay.
All right. So let's jump to it.
Thank you.
How about Matthew?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Matthew, and apologies for the dramatic lighting behind me. My lamps died 5 minutes before the meeting, so now I look like I'm interrogating my books. I have a theatre background as well. So I'm a playwright, and I've had some professional productions over here in Australia. I've had 10 productions across the country and some national tours and some publications. And a couple of years ago, I decided to, like you, I suddenly realized the paycheck's not really going to be sustainable. So I thought I'd give film and TV a go. I wrote some screenplays and sent them into a competition over in LA called Screencraft. And I got shortlisted in one category for a drama, and I won the action thriller category, which was
fantastic.
I really had a really good experience with that. And I sort of bounced all that momentum around for a little bit, and I've recently sold a screenplay to a company over here with some producers.
What genre?
The new one is a comedy, romantic comedy.
Great.
But it's quite whimsical. It's an adaptation of a theatre show I worked on a few years ago. But basically, two neighbours in an apartment block, their lives are thrown into chaos when the wall between their apartments has decided they belong together, and it's trying to conspire all the elements of the building to bring these two together.
I like that.
So that's with producer named Tony Ayres and Michael McMahon down in Melbourne, with a director, LA director attached to it, Alethea Jones.
Oh yes, of course, I know Alethea.
Right, yeah, she's wonderful. We've been working on it.
Yeah, fantastic. So, although I didn't say it in my introduction, I also have a lot of experience in the feature side. I currently am doing a huge feature movie for Paramount that hopefully will be a franchise and make me enough money that I can buy an island somewhere. Hasn't happened yet, but we'll see. But if there's any questions, since I'm not specifically focusing on features, there's going to be a section later on where if there's a question that you have on the feature side, feel free to ask it. The other thing I wanted to say, Matthew, that you reminded me of is the difference between producing television and theater is that you don't have to sew the costumes yourself. It's a really big plus that you discover once you start doing this. But otherwise, it's kind of like putting on a big play. It's a better budget.
Yeah.
Fun. Well, that's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, who should go next? Rachel?
Unmute. Hi, everybody. Okay, I know a couple of you. Well, I know Drew, and I kind of know Ellen through a mutual friend, but I don't know anyone else. It's really nice to meet everyone, and it's nice to meet you, Aaron. Okay, so funnily enough, I also wanted to be an actor, and I'm also not very good at it, so I left that behind. And yeah, so I wanted to be an actor, and I also worked on a reality show. I actually worked on The Bachelor here as an associate producer. So, and also
yeah, it makes you feel
love that.
Very dirty, doesn't it?
Really dirty, very dirty. Yeah. I wrote for I was a journalist a long time ago, and I use that term loosely because I worked for a gossip magazine. So I've done all of the wrong and bad things. I'm a novelist. I write short form fiction as well. I've won some literary awards. I've worked on a couple of TV shows here. I was storyliner for a show called Mako Mermaids, which was on Netflix and Disney, with a producer called Jonathan Schiff, who's quite prolific here at Kids TV. Worked on another couple of TV shows, more adult drama, and I write features as well as TV. So, and also taught screenwriting for a while for a film school here.
Fun.
So I've kind of done bits and pieces of lots of stuff. The project I submitted for this, or the writing sample I submitted for this, I'm working on developing a few TV shows at the moment, but the one for this is a rom-com as well. So as Matthew, you're saying that you write rom-coms. I'm a bit of a sucker for a good rom-com.
The world needs more of them.
Yeah. The world does need more rom-coms, needs some more happy. So that's kind of me.
That's awesome. Well, if anyone has any screenplay questions, you can address them to Rachel. Excellent. Ellen, let's go to you.
Okay, hello, I'm Ellen. I know some of you, but I don't know all of you. Thank you, Aaron. This is awesome. I'm so excited. Okay, about me, I got back from LA about a year ago after living there for a year. And while I was over there, I worked full-time as a teacher in a bunch of different roles. I was a middle school English language arts teacher at a school in South Central LA. I worked as a 5th grade teacher at a Catholic school, and I was even a counselor for elementary school kids. And while I was doing that, I was also doing the professional program in TV writing at UCLA, where I was very lucky and I won the program's competition at the end of the year for Best TV Drama Pilot.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you. It was very unexpected, but a lot has sort of picked up for me since then. I made it into the top 6% of writers for Writers on the Verge. And then what else did I do? I am also doing a playwriting fellowship with a local company here in Brisbane at the moment. And then in the last month, even though my focus has always been TV drama, I worked as a script editor on a feature film, and then I also got hired to write the pilot for a preschool animated series, which was a bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the project that I submitted for the scholarship was set in a small Australian outback town where every year on the same day someone goes missing. And it follows the family whose oldest daughter is the latest person to disappear as they attempt to cope with their loss and unravel the mystery itself. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. All right, Drew.
Unmuting. Hi, I'm Drew.
Hello.
Thank you so much for spending your Sunday with us too, Aaron. That's very, very kind of you.
Of course.
I'm also predominantly, I've been in the feature space. I've got a few projects in development, writing, directing there, working both in LA and here in Australia. And then in the TV space, I've got a TV show, which is what I submitted for this, which is in development with Essential Media here in Australia. It's a young adult murder mystery thing with the narrative device where each episode's told through a different kid's point of view. with their biases and the way they see the world altering the events. So you leaves the audience constantly guessing both who's the murderer and who's the victim by retelling the same day through 8 different points of view. So that's the main TV project that I've got working on at the moment.
Very cool. Very cool. Like the little Rashomon thing going on. I like it.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Well, congratulations. All right, Rihanna, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you are, Rihanna. How are
That's
you?
fantastic. I'm doing well.
Good. Yeah, so for me, I actually started off working in the art department. So I've spent a few years as a production designer on music videos and short films and things like that. And then eventually graduated to television as a set dresser. And then graduated to feature, well, not graduated to feature film, also moved into feature film and work sort of back and forth between standby props and set dressing. And I still occasionally do a bit of that between writing gigs, mainly just because I have withdrawals if I'm away from set too long. You know, it's definitely something I've fallen in love with. But then I was working on Dora the Explorer, Dora and the Lost City of Gold, when I got a phone call from Kath Shelper, who's a producer here in Australia. And she produces a comedy sketch show called Black Comedy, which is Indigenous comedy sketch show. And she'd read some of my comedy scripts that were floating around and invited me into a writer's room. And from there, I ended up being a writer on the show, on the final season of their show. And then from there, I basically just, there've been a lot of really cool initiatives come through Screen Queensland and also Screen Australia that I've been involved with. I did an initiative through Screen Queensland, which was called Talent Camp, which was basically for to get more diverse writers into the Australian film industry. So it was a series of kind of mini masterclasses, which then ended with us being introduced to producers and local production companies. So from that, I've sort of picked up a bit of work on a children's television show writing called The Strange Chores with Ludo Studios. And I've just been invited into a bunch of different writers' rooms, which has been really cool, sometimes as an observer, because I'm still relatively new, but others as a writer as well. And I currently have a project in development with Screen Australia. And yeah, just taking it one thing at a time, you know, just taking all the opportunities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So that's cool. You had when you were in writers' rooms, you were in a half-hour, sounds like more of a sketch show. Is that what it was? I'm not familiar with that show.
Yeah, I was in a sketch show, half-hour sketch show. But I've also been in writers' rooms for 1 hour dramas.
4 hour dramas as well. Very different energy.
Yeah, it's so different. And then obviously a kids show as well. So it's all, it's all over the place. A whole range of experiences. Yeah.
A real variety. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. That's really great. All right. Who's next? David, I think you're next.
Hi. Okay.
Hello.
So let's see. My working career, professional career, I guess, started in software engineering. Did that for quite a while, and I still kind of do it from time to time. It generally pays better than writing at the moment. But I sort of stepped into film in 2010, I guess, started doing the bachelor degree at Griffith Film School. Focused mostly on producing and a bit of writing there. And after graduating, did some writing, did some editing. I was doing editing as well, video editing. And so was doing some producing on the side, but not much money, occasionally getting paid to edit, and ended up coming back to do the masters at Griffith to do a feature film co-production with a Korean film school that took about 18 months and ended up not going anywhere, which was fun, but it was a good learning experience, I guess. So I still had my master's degree to finish off after that. So I ended up switching to writing. So I wrote a feature film for my thesis, and that's actually the project that I submitted for this. Was the first 30 pages of that. So it's about sort of two timelines. It starts with a girl when she's 13 years old, a refugee in Indonesia who ends up on a boat trying to get to Australia, and intercuts with her 30 years later as an astronaut on a spaceship trying to get to Mars. So that's sort of
very cool.
It's working out all right. So I'm still working on the second draft of that at the moment. Last year I co-wrote an audio drama, which is now out on Audible, called Beyond Strange Lands. It's a sort of paranormal sci-fi adventure series set in the Australian outback. So yeah, that's kind of me.
Fantastic. Yeah, the funny thing is all of your jobs, everyone here who's mentioned it, they all will help you, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Even software, and you might be able to fix Final Draft when it crashes, but everything else, like it's amazing how you don't know it till it's happening. But all of these weird careers, like I had such a strange road, and all of us have, and it only makes you a better writer and a better producer when the time comes. I have some friends who, for 10 years in Los Angeles, I directed a live stage show called the Thrilling Adventure Hour. That was a podcast that some of you may or may not have heard of, but we recorded it live at this theater. It's kind of like I didn't want to leave theater behind entirely, so I would direct it once a month, and we would do these giant stage shows, and we would record it, and the guys who wrote it turned it into a podcast that they are still doing to this day, through Audible and through a couple other places. And it is amazing, all these new doors that have opened up in the Audible podcast space for narrative drama that I think are going to be only getting more exciting as time goes on. That's cool. All right, Tanya, you're up.
Just unmuting. Hi, everybody. Hi, Aaron. Lovely to meet you.
Hello.
I know
hello.
some of you, but not all of you. So hello. I'm very, very happy to be here. My journey has been a bit of a wiggly woggly one where I've come through a lot of careers to be at this point. So I've been writing screenplays for a couple of years now, but up to that point I did bizarre things like hairdressing, swimming coach, police officer, trauma counsellor, all of that sort of stuff. So kept on getting bored and wondering why. Now I know why. So I was doing a lot of academic writing, but that became a little boring in the end as well. So I've was on talent camp with Rihanna back in 2019, the end of 2019 last year. So since then, like Rihanna, I've been trying to take up as many opportunities as I possibly can to learn more about the industry and keep on writing. So I had the opportunity to pitch to a streaming service a couple of weeks ago, which was fantastic, terrifying,
great,
but fantastic. Just an amazing experience to sort of understand what happens in that sort of situation. The story that I pitched to Greg Coote was a story about a violence response team that responds to domestic violence in Brisbane. So you have a police officer and a social worker, and it's about their traumas. It's paranormal / mental health, which is it. And it's about the two of them ending up in an outback Queensland town where their paths actually converge. You get to know that they actually are a lot more connected than what they were. So and I'm on the Sunshine Coast, and it's absolutely glorious up here at the moment.
That's so awesome. So hour-long drama, it sounds like that you're playing it.
Yes.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, Sean. You are up.
I'm up. Great. Just unmuting. Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you all, and lovely to meet you, Aaron. Thank you for your time. My background is I am an actor, as well as a writer and director. The sort of acting and writing all sort of came together after drama school, where I was in a theatre company and we produced all our own stuff. So we were all writing, as well as sewing costumes and trying to get it up. And then after that, I had a production company, and we sort of did some short form things that got picked up by our local broadcaster, ABC, and they gave us some money to do a sort of short form horror comedy called The Abominable Flatmate, about the abominable snowman moving into a share household. And we did that, and then that led on to us working for a network called Movie Network that used to be on a pay TV service, Foxtel, over here. They're closed down since then, and we did some work with them, and then they asked us to pitch some projects, and we pitched a project, and they gave us development funding. So that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, and got paid, and it was great. It was a great experience. I ended up not going with our show, and then the network ended up closing down. But it was a great experience. And then from that, I got asked to head over to Afghanistan, where I went over for about a year and a half and worked with an Afghan company, media company over there, and help work with their young Afghan writers and directors. And we kind of worked together, and helping them through how to use cameras and sound equipment. And then we wrote, they wrote a police drama series, the first ever police drama series for Afghan TV. And we shot that, and that was a crazy experience over there. And then I got back. I was living in America for a while. I got a Screen Australia had invited me to be a part of a writers thing where we had to pitch a comedy screenplay, and we sort of all pitched it. And once we got it, we got a little bit of money, and I went over to America and lived for a couple of years and wrote a comedy screenplay, which is now the sort of I've adapted that into a TV series, which is the one I pitched for Greg Coote, which is about, God, I can't believe how nervous I am. Which is, I do know the name of it, which is called Magpie.
I hope you know the name of it.
I know by this point. It's called Magpie and the Pigeon, and it's an 8 by 30-minute comedy action series. I'll just read out the logline, which asks the question, when is it time to give up on your dream? So it's on the verge of turning 30 and feeling the pressure to grow up. Magpie, Amy Brennan, 29, tall, lanky, with a chip on her shoulder that screams, why haven't I made it yet? And the pigeon, Rebecca Thatcher, 29, short, big-hearted, and secretly thinking of leaving the costumer game to find a real job. 2 unemployed, codependent, still living with their parents, wannabe costumers, which in this world are superheroes, though there's nothing actually super about them. Struggle with moving into the next stage of their lives and the possibility of having to leave their dreams and each other behind.
Nice.
So that was the project.
Nice. And that's the one that you submitted to Greg Coote.
That was the one, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, nice to meet you. Nice to meet all of you guys.
Nice to meet you.
It is impressive. Like, you guys all have such eclectic backgrounds in things that are both exactly what I do every day on New Amsterdam, and things that will help you when you get to that point. So it's pretty great. So I'm going to jump in from here just to talk a little bit about breaking in on just some sort of more general, general ideas, things that I always tell people. Granted, as I speak to you guys, I feel like a lot of you are in, and you're just trying to find a way into the next room in the maze that is this business. I think these rules still apply. The thing that I always have discovered is there's sort of 3 rules to getting all the way up the ladder in Hollywood or in the business, or whichever coast you want to be in, which is there's no one way to do it. There's no right way, and it's really hard. Those are the three rules. It's hard for everybody. Every once in a while you'll have a friend who's like, oh, I hit someone's car in the parking lot and they gave me a television show. You know, like that, you know, that has happened. Doesn't happen very often. But here are the things that I tell everyone to do, and things that I still do myself. The first is write. Always be writing. You're writers. You should be writing all the time. Writing on spec, writing for free. Basically, like when you wake up in the morning, you should be working on a project. That's a big deal, because the writing will only make you better. It's like any other skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And I feel like so many people who I have worked with get to this place where they think they should just be given a job, or they should have sold something, and they stop writing, waiting. They have one project and they're like, this is the one, and I'm just going to put all my eggs in that one basket. And that is just a real roadblock for your own toolbox as a writer. Maybe you will eventually sell that one thing, but in that time that you were waiting to do that, you could have been making yourself a better writer and a better producer by constantly be writing. Not everything you write will be made, but you will learn something from everything else. I'm going to push this idea back to a little bit later, actually, as I'm looking at my notes. So here are the things why you should be constantly writing that I do. As someone who is, I'm currently an executive producer on a television show. I have multiple features and a bunch of other things in the hopper. I still write on spec. Here's the reason why you should always be doing it. One is the new material that you come up with just acts as ammunition for your agents or your managers, whoever you have representing you. They work best when they have new material from you. So if you're one of those writers that has like the one idea and they're like, have you sold my screenplay yet, or my TV pilot? It's like, well, they can try, but the more things they have that they can work with, the better. Secondly, as I mentioned a second ago, every script that you write will be better than the last script you wrote. It just happens by nature of you learn little tricks and you start to, and I think a lot of you were probably past this in terms of like the first few steps, but like your voice constantly develops as a writer and as a storyteller in ways that like I can't predict and you can't predict until you're into a story that you are excited about and you want to tell. And then all of a sudden, in order to tell that story, you need a skill that you previously didn't have. You didn't even know you didn't have it. But you reach a point in the story where you're like, how am I going to communicate this beat or this tone? Or how do I make this surprise work? And that oftentimes leads to a new skill of communicating your story on the page, which is what this masterclass is primarily about. Obviously, there's a lot of other, things once the script is done that you can do to amplify it and to bring those ideas to life. But to me, the page is where it starts. And every script I write, I always find myself to this day being like, oh, that's such a cool thing I just happened to discover. I wish I'd known it 2 scripts ago, but I'm gonna now use it moving forward in the next thing I write. The last thing is read every pilot or every screenplay you can get your hands on. I have a bunch that at the end of this I can send out through Samantha that are what I would consider like they are a masterclass in and of themselves, not one that I don't even need to teach. Like you can just read them, because each of the pilots is written with such a ferocious point of view from the writer that you sense the show right off the bat. Like usually it's in a few pages, and some of these shows are shows that you know. Some of them you may or may not be familiar, depending on how much TV you watch. But the crazy thing is the scripts. There's this thing, and I can't remember who. I don't want to take credit for this, what I'm about to say, because I did not come up with it, but I stand by it, which is a phrase called the plasticity of the page, which is the concept that telling a story in a written form, especially for a screenplay or a TV pilot, is more than just the story you're telling. It's what it looks like on the page, like how it's spaced. Like we've all seen, I'm sure, screenplays or pilots where you turn the first page and it's just a steady wall of words. It's just like words. And so much that you're like, oh, I got to read my friend's pilot, and you start going through it, and it's exhausting because it's the information, the tone, the character, the parts of the story that matter are all squished in amongst all the other stuff that makes it very, very hard to feel the work of art. The plasticity of the page is this idea that how you break down each paragraph, how you leave the eye is going sort of in concert, hand in hand with the story you're telling. One of my favorite ones, and again, I'll send this pilot at the end of the thing so you guys can look at it, is the pilot for The Leftovers. I'm not sure if you're aware of that show, but it is spectacular as a pilot goes. Not only can you tell the tone and the feel of it within the first page or two, like you can just, you know it in your bones, and it's amazing that it takes them so little time to communicate this feeling of this show. Not only that, the way that they manipulate your eye as a reader, literally where the spaces are in the paragraphs, how the moments are pulled out, which words are capitalized, all of that stuff makes you feel like you're watching it, even though you're just reading it. Similar is like the Fleabag pilot on that sort of half-hour side. Within 2 pages, you know this world so viscerally, and it's all how it is laid out on the page, in addition to the story. Like, you can't do that without a good story. Obviously, you need a good story. But I find that that element of writing is oftentimes underlooked or underutilized. And I was working on this pilot a couple years ago, and I knew I wanted to have this moment in it that was reminiscent of another show I'd seen. It was completely different in terms of genre and everything, but I was like, the thing I felt in this other show, I want to make the reader feel that thing. How did they write it? How was this written in the script? And was it just something the director added? You know, was it even in the script? I wasn't sure. So I looked up, and I used The Leftovers, this moment in The Leftovers, and it's in the script. And the moment, and I was like, oh, as a writer, this was a number of years ago, I was like, oh, you can do this. You can give the reader these little railings to guide them through your script in a way that I sometimes say is meta, like meta sentences or things that like really will communicate something in a profound way. And before that, I never did it. Like when I was trained as a writer, I was told, if you can't see it, right, if you shouldn't write it in the script, right? Don't add any extra stuff. I don't think that's true anymore. I used to think that. I think there's obviously like you can go too far in that regard. You don't want to all of a sudden be like, now the character is thinking blank, and then write a whole monologue that they're just thinking as they stare at the moon. That wouldn't work. But there's lots of ways that you can do it that communicate a sense of profound and visceral tone that I think is invaluable. And again, it could be comedy or drama. It's not. But those are two like extreme examples of that. Secondly, and this is again a sort of controversial topic, which is specs versus original pilots. When people come to Los Angeles now, in the last 5 or 6 years, all people want to see is your original pilot. What's your original pilot? Do you have an original pilot? Send it over. When I got my foot in the door, if you said that, they'd be like, why do you think you should write a pilot? You have no experience. Even if you sold it, you wouldn't run it. So weird, right? So what I had to do when I started was writing Spec Scripts, which for those of you who don't know, I'm assuming you all know, but that's, you write a sample of an existing television show that exists somewhere in canon. And you kind of like, you pick a section of a story you like, and you kind of move a few episodes apart, and you kind of imagine yours somewhere in the middle. And you know, back in the day when I was doing it, I would like go to the Writers Guild library in Los Angeles, and I would find examples of the existing show and try to model my writing on exactly the same tone and what it looked like on the page. So if I were writing an episode of, back in the day, West Wing or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something like that, I wanted my script to look like the actual scripts of the shows, because this emulation will do a couple of things. The first is for any of you on this masterclass, if you were to get hired in Los Angeles on a show, you will not be writing your voice, right? All of you have such amazing and different voices just based on our very brief and stilted Zoom introductions that we're doing. But like when you're hired, you know, on a show in the business, especially when you're just starting out, you're there to write the showrunner's vision. And it will be it's not impossible again, but it's very unlikely that you would be the showrunner of your first show. It could happen again, but again, very infrequent does that happen. And you don't want to be the person that's writing your voice into an Aaron Sorkin show. You'll get fired. You know, I've had plenty of friends who worked on certain shows and they were like, oh, I can add my voice to this show and make it like really their voice. And it doesn't work. Your job as a writer in a staff situation is to help the showrunner, help the showrunner's vision come to fruition. So you want to write in their voice. So when I started out, I wrote a bunch of specs. And some of them were shows I really loved, and some of them were shows I didn't love, but I was kind of curious how they worked. Like I wanted to try to write them just to sort of see if I could do it. And every single spec I wrote when I started out would make my own voice better. Because I would learn something about myself as a writer. When I tried to write in Arrested Development, it was spectacularly hard and incredibly fun. And at the end, I was like, oh my God, this show in 24 pages has 11 storylines and 6,000 jokes, and everything is like, you know, every joke has like 3 meanings and plays on 4 different stories. And like being that efficient as a writer was something that I hadn't had to deal with before. So I've been doing mostly hour-long stuff. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, okay, now when I write my hour-long, can I make my scenes do double duty? Can I make certain lines play in different ways? It was like a lesson that I learned having written. And that spec, that Arrested Development spec, was not for anyone. I have never showed it to anyone. I don't think anything ever happened with it. Back in the day, I used to, you know, apply to different, not funding bodies, but, you know, like award things out here in Los Angeles to try to, you know, break in. But like it was, now people only want pilots, and I sort of feel like something's lost in the sort of journey of a writer. And I would say if you have the chance and you don't know what to write, like let's say you just finished a project and right now you're trying to think of your next pilot or your next screenplay, I would strongly urge you to pick a show you love and take the 2-3 weeks to break down that show into how many acts, how many scenes, how do they do it, and then try to make your own version of it. Because at the very least, it will make you better. And it will make you better in a profound way that will help you on day-to-day of what people do for the most part in Los Angeles on television shows. Of the 550 shows on the air, most of the people are writing towards a showrunner's vision that is not specifically their voice. That said, like you could be on a show where your voice and the showrunner's voice meld perfectly. And I've been on those shows and it's spectacularly fun. I've been on shows where I'm like, oh, this isn't my taste, but I know how to write in a way that the showrunner likes. And so I could write to that. And as a result, I got more work. I was, you know, given more scripts, that kind of stuff. But I just feel like it isn't done as much anymore. I've a couple of younger writers I mentor in Los Angeles, and I'm always like, take an episode of Dark on Netflix and like break it down. Like that show is spectacularly crafted. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And the structure is mind-numbingly carefully built into this crazy Jenga tower. How do they do it? Well, the only way to do it is to disassemble it yourself and find out. So sometimes when I'm watching a show I love, I'll sit with a pad of paper and I'll be like, okay, A story, B story, and I'll kind of keep track. So at the end, I'll be like, oh, okay, season 6 of Homeland, this is how they would break down their average hour of television. So I'm kind of curious. I want to compare it to what I do. I want to compare it to what New Amsterdam does. And I want to steal the things that are working really well so that I can reformat them into my own writing. They won't be the same once they're done with your own voice. They'll be your own. But the sort of like mathematical structure part of it is up for grabs and worth worth using those pieces to make yourself better. Lastly, and this is a thing that I'm not going to spend too much time on because it's terrible but true, which is that networking is the other little piece of the puzzle for this business. You kind of have to be, it's a combination of right place, right time. And that usually means you've met the right people and you have the right samples. And no one can tell you what that is. There's no actual equation. So my theory is the best way to do it is constantly be upgrading your samples, constantly be adding to your quiver of material, and constantly be networking. And networking to me, when I first started, I was really bitter about it because I was like, oh, it's so gross, like using people, blah, blah, blah. But I realized that isn't what it is. What it is finding people that you respond to as artists and trying to build a connection with them. Because you can learn a lot from them. And if you are, ultimately what you want to do is have a job where you work with people that you really enjoy. You want to go to work and, we work long hours. I'm sure all of you know, who've done this even a little bit. Our average work weeks are, excessive. And you don't want to be going to work with people you don't like. So networking to me became a thing where I would find people that I responded to. Either we liked the same shows, we responded to the same books or music or something. And we just forged relationships about art. And then when the right time came, I had that connection that was already there. It's obviously, it's a reality of the situation, but there's ways to make it where it's not as craven as I think I thought it was when I began. But it's crazy to think it doesn't exist. So that's the last I'll say about that. Before we go on any further, I would like to open it up to any questions up to this point on anything specific about breaking in or anything I said about specs or any of this. Let's hear it. There's possible that there's things in this section I've just kind of skipped over, but yes.
Yeah, I had one.
Yeah.
I guess earlier you were talking about how producers or people you meet will ask you to send them your spec pilot. I'm just wondering, is there anything in place to protect spec pilots that you're sending out to people you've just met? Like, is there protocol with that, or?
Well, if you're talking about an original pilot,
yeah.
For the distinction I make is a spec to me is like, oh, you wrote an episode.
Sorry, I meant an original pilot. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, like NCIS or something. But an original pilot, there's a couple things. One, you can register it with the Writers Guild. I'm not sure how that works in Australia, but in the US,
okay.
I think anyone can do it. I think you could do it. Ultimately, my experience has been that with producers, the overall rule is we try in general to not leave behind anything. That's like a general rule for all writers in Los Angeles. When you go to pitch on a screenplay and you brought your notes because you've done your take on the screenplay, you don't leave behind your notes, even if they ask, and they will ask. With pilots, it's a little harder. Once it's all completely done and you have a record of it, it's on your computer, you've sent it to friends, ideally you've registered it. If someone tries to steal it, I mean, could it happen? Yes. It doesn't happen that often, just because it would be much easier just to like hire you if they liked it, right? With 500 shows in America going on right now, like there's no reason for them to try to like steal it and give it to someone else. They might try to make you a bad deal. They might say, I want to buy it for $1, and then someone else gets to run it. But ultimately, it's your creative thing, and so you own it. And but usually when producers ask to see a sample for me, it's either coming from the people who represent me, my lawyer or my managers, and they wouldn't send it to someone who is just some thief, some intellectual property thief looking to find a good story. Years ago, I'd written this screenplay that I was very excited about, and it never got made. But at one point, I had a meeting that I thought was about the screenplay parked in Hollywood and went to this meeting. The meeting went very badly. And when I came back down, my car had been broken into and someone had stolen my bag that had the script in it. And I was like, oh, man, that's like insult to injury. Like, not only did I not get whatever the job was I was interviewing for, but like a thief literally stole the screenplay. I was like, this is amazing. But that thief didn't get it produced either. So it's just hard. Even for an average car thief, it's hard to get a screenplay up and running, I guess. Any other questions in this sort of 50,000 foot view?
You've mentioned sort of representation a couple of times.
Yes.
What's your experience with actually getting representation in the beginning?
Great question. And it's funny, I didn't even make I made like some notes of like what I wanted to talk to you guys about, and that one didn't even make the list. And the reason is, at some point in your careers, you're going to need representation. That is, I think, true. I have found in my experience that it is only once you've gotten a job that you get the good agent. And before you've gotten the job, you can get the mediocre agent, right? Who doesn't really do anything. Every job that I've ever gotten in this business, I got myself, right? It's the hustle, that's part of it. It's the networking, it's having the right material. It's when you go in these meetings, you do a good job. Your manager or your agent can get you those meetings, but you have to be the one to do it. Right now, I'm not sure how much you guys are aware of what's happening in the industry over in Los Angeles, but last year, all of us fired our agents. Every single writer collectively fired the agents in Los Angeles because we found that they were being dishonest with us, and they were supposed to be our fiduciaries. So we let them go en masse. And I still have a manager and I have a lawyer who does my contract. And I really like my managers a lot. But I find that when I was starting out, that it's easier for you, I would say, put your energy into making your samples the strongest and building out your web of people that are working in the industries that share your interests, that have either read you or like you. It's very rare that I think you would start out as a raw piece of coal and some manager or agent would make you a diamond. I just find that they collect a bunch of writers. They have a stable of 1 million people, and they just throw everything against the wall and hope one of them sticks. So I stopped worrying about that at some point. And once I got my first job, which I got myself through, as I mentioned, through a series of weird, random roads. Once I got the good guys, I had agents like knocking on my door, do you want to be represented? And they were, good agents at that point. But they weren't. Where were they like 2 weeks before when I didn't have a job? I was the same writer. I was the same level of skill. So I find it all very hard. And I don't know what's happening. I don't know the Australian market nearly as well as I do the Los Angeles one, but in LA, I'm always like, I always tell people like, get the job first, and the agents will follow, the managers will follow. Anyone else in this? No. David didn't like my answer. I'm sorry. Sorry, David. Feel bad.
No, it's fine. And I mean, it's one of those things, I guess, you hear as someone starting out, as like that essentially a lot of the jobs that come to people come through representation one way or the other. Otherwise, we're all kind of scrambling to get our foot in the door to have that initial meeting. But it's not, I mean, Australia, who knows? I mean, I honestly don't know what the deal is with agents in Australia and whether that opens many doors, or if my impression is that especially in Queensland, we're fairly collegial. Like, it's not that difficult to get in touch with a producer and have a conversation here.
Right, which helps. I mean, to me, it's like, one of the jobs I got years ago was on a television show that I got the job because of Twitter. I was on Twitter and I was talking about writing, and I ended up, at that time writing, to the showrunner of that show. We struck up a Twitter friendship. I mean, like it was like that, and then he ended up hiring me. The other way that that you could go about it, which is if there's writers that you admire that have the career or are at a place that you want, you can look up who their representation is. And if you have material that you think, you can always reach out that way and see if they're accepting submissions. But I would target it rather than, like, not every manager, not every agent will help you. You need the one that understands you and really wants to open those doors, because it isn't easy to open those doors. So, I've found that, like, that targeting can do it. I've definitely seen people find an agent or a manager that they found through that route, and that can work. But in my experience, it's always been like, try to find a way around it if you can. And usually the agent or manager will show up afterwards to be like, hey, can I have 10% of that? All that work you did, All right, any other questions before we jump into? Yes.
Oh, sorry, you go,
Joe.
You go first.
Mine's super quick, Aaron. I just wanted to ask about the no writing left behind idea, because I've pitched on a few OWAs and had that issue of producers going, can I get your notes, or have you got a one page or something for this? What's the easiest way to respond to that? Do you just say, I can't leave writing behind? I just find that it's an awkward thing when you're pretty green still and a producer's saying. Yeah,
they will never stop asking. So usually what happens for me is I'll have something, well, a couple of things. When I've been switching this recently, and it's worked better, which is all my pitch will be on my iPad, right? Mm-hmm. So when I'm in the room and I finish pitching, there's not anything for me to leave behind, which physically. They will occasionally say, could you email that to me? And then what I usually respond is, it's not like these are my notes. It's kind of like notes. So it's not like anything I can share with you, even if that's not true, even if what you pitched is a perfectly beautifully structured whatever, you can say, like, oh, it's kind of just an internal document, but I'm happy to keep having discussions with you about it if you like my take, and we can do that kind of thing. Because and that's more a problem when it comes to features than it is on the TV side, by a pretty hefty discrepancy. Because on features, oftentimes you're being brought in for a concept and they're saying, hey, pitch us your version of it. And essentially the Writers Guild stands by the belief that, like, you can talk, that's fine. You can share things this way, but your writing is your material, and until they pay for it, they don't get to have it. So usually I'm very kind about it, just to say, oh, it's more internal document. I don't really have anything I can send you, but I'm happy to keep talking. I love the project and want to be considered for it.
Sure. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel?
Just going back to managers and agents. So what would you say is more advantageous to have? I mean, I kind of have an idea, but if you can go through the difference, a manager or an agent, because I know I mean, from the perspective of if you're trying to break in, especially in LA, and in terms of building your career, the differences between the two and what they will do for you, and which would be better to have.
The difference between them is definitely shrinking ever since we fired all the big agents. So to me, it's, for example, the way it used to be was that an agent was the one who could solicit you work, and the managers would manage your career. And that was like this and that's, even as I'm saying it now, it's very kind of vague. But the idea was that managers couldn't solicit work for you. That was the rule in Los Angeles. Since we fired all of the agents, that has changed slightly, as you can imagine. Managers are soliciting work, and it's working. To me, it all comes down to two factors. One is you should like the person who represents you. When you're meeting with them, they're working for you, right? So when you sit down to meet with them, just remember you're hiring them, right? You're paying them out of your paycheck. It's not like they're hiring you. That's a weird power play that they constantly try to make you feel that way. But, like, if you make money, you're paying them out of your salary. So you want to like that person, or you want to think that they are so good at what they do, it's okay that you hate them. Hopefully that won't be the case, but mostly you want to like them. I like my managers a lot. They are really lovely people. I trust them, and I can be frank with them. Back when I had agents, I was for many years at WME, who is like a huge agency out in Los Angeles. And my agents I was very close to. They were people who I trusted and looked up to, and it was very sad to have to fire them on a sort of like human level. To me, what you want is an advocate. And so whether that's a manager or an agent, it doesn't, to me at this stage in the game, seems like a non-difference, especially in Australia, because I'm not sure if the agent manager thing is, I just don't know that world as much, but this person's your advocate. This is the person that calls up for you and is like saying, oh, you got to read Rachel's new script. It's amazing. Whoever that person is, regardless of their title, I think you want to have a connection with them. And so I say, don't be, be picky, don't be picky. Don't not be picky. No. Are we back?
Yes, there you go. You're back.
Oh my God. Did you miss any amazing stuff? Probably. No.
Yeah, you kind of stopped like a while back. So.
Oh no! How deep was I? I tried to admit somebody, and then everything froze. Terrible.
You're talking about the agent being your advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I stand by it. Yeah. So I was saying, like, what's weird is now you guys are all in different boxes. You've moved around. And I'm like, wait, where did Rachel go? Yeah. So to me, you want that person to be someone that you trust and rely on, because they're going to be the ones calling up and soliciting work for you on your behalf. But as I was trying to say before the crash was just that, like, for me, the manager versus agent is, as long as they're an advocate for you, that's all you really need. And I, for only a brief period, had both. And I don't know if I would want both again. I don't know. I don't have an agent now, and I only have a manager and I have a lawyer. So I'll also see how the next few years go. But right now, I've not been missing not having an agent in Los Angeles. So.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Apologize for that crash, you guys.
On the lawyer question, could you just briefly talk about how you found one, but also like what is the financial arrangement, etc.? I have no idea.
Yeah, so I was doing a deal, and a friend of mine needed a lawyer because I felt like I was getting screwed, which I was. And so I asked a friend who was in the business, and he said, oh, my lawyer's great. And I met him with his lawyer, and I ended up hiring him. The way that it works is twofold. You can either have a percentage fee, which is what I do. I give my lawyer 5%, and he does all of my contracts for everything, and is invaluable. You also can do a per hour deal, which I think it depends on where you are in your career, if that's a good move or not. And only you could know that. But I definitely feel like contracts have gotten a lot more crazy recently, especially with all the streaming and all this other stuff that doesn't fall into things covered by the NBA in overt ways. So I rely on my lawyer all the time. Yes, Laura.
Hi. And feel free to say that you're going to address this later.
Sure.
But a question I had, I think, since talking contracts and things, at sort of what stage in the game when you're co-writing with somebody, do you sort of bring contracts and things into it? I've just found myself getting into funny, no problems or anything, but like co-writing, I can be a little bit tricky in some ways in terms of intellectual property and just how do you co-write, and what's your advice there?
So for a number of years I had a writing partner, and we never had any formal agreement between the two of us. If I were to do it now, I probably would do that, but at the time we were young and we didn't know any better. And what that has left us, we're still very friendly, and there's no weirdness there. But I know that nowadays it's much more typical to get something in paper up front, just so that you can protect your own IP and the other writer can protect their IP. If you're just collaborating on one script with them, then it's pretty straightforward. It's like 50-50, and you just kind of, you talk it out, and that's what it's going to be. But if it's going to be a longer partnership, you might want something that's more formal. I worked with a writing team who are on Twitter. They are Julie and Shauna Benson. They're the Benson sisters. And I've worked with them on a couple different shows. And I know that even though they're sisters, they have an agreement between each other, which I've not seen the specifics of it, but I know it's so that, they can have their own ideas that are separate, and not everything is just owned by the partnership. So, and when I started out, like, it's weird because it never even occurred to me to do that. And when my writing partner and I decided to formally stop writing together, there were certain projects that we now, like, we have a bunch of stuff that are half ideas or half done, or we never quite, cracked the twist in this thing. And there's been times when each of us have been like, hey, can I have the whatever idea? Are you gonna do anything with it? And it's like this weird, awkward, like we're both tiptoeing around the carcasses of our old ideas. Whereas if we had something in paper in advance, it may have made that a little less awkward.